Hello everyone again and welcome to this particular video, and in here we're going to be exploring the other way around. You remember my previous video where we talked about given the area, how you're going to be able to determine not only the radius but also the perimeter and finally the circumference. This time we're going to go in the reverse way. Given the circumference as shown in this question, which says that where a cyclist makes a full circle trip of distance 40 kilometers, find the following. Now you're given these, you're asked to determine 1, the diameter, 2 is the radius, and finally is the area. And what are the math skills that you need to do in order for you to determine not only the diameter, the radius, but also the area? And this is where first you need to have like a picture of what is going on. So based on this question, we know that we have the cyclist that is making a full circle trip of distance 40 kilometers, which means that this particular cyclist starts here, makes a full circle trip and ends here. And this particular circle that is shown right here is covering a total distance of, in this case, 40 kilometers, which means that this number represents what? The circumference of the circle, which is represented as C. So C is, I would say, the circumference of a specific circle, which is the total distance around or the outer layer of your circle. So in this case here, we're going to ask to determine the diameter given the circumference, and what we know is that first, to solve it, we need to remember those formulas. So pick the formula that has the specific variable and requires you to determine the unknown variable. So we know that diameter is represented as D, and so therefore for solving, we remember that there is a relationship that connects the diameter, which is determined to be the total distance from one end of a circle going through the center to the other end of the circle, which is represented as D. And so D is the relationship, or shows relationship between pi and circumference. And we notice that yes, it is the circumference divided by r pi, and we know that in this case r pi is expressed as, in this case, 3.14. Therefore the circumference, which is measured to be 40 kilometers, is going to be divided by 3.14. so therefore our calculator will be used to determine this number. So we grab a calculator, we start from this particular beginning, and we know that we're starting at 40, remember, kilometers, and we're going to divide the number by pi, and pi is represented as the symbol, which is what we have right here, and then you hit equal sign, and our answer is 12.732. So that is our specific diameter for our specific distance from one end of the circle to the other end. And so our answer here is 12.73 kilometers for our specific diameter. So now we've determined that diameter, our next task is to determine the radius. We know that the radius is represented as r, and the radius can be determined in one or two ways, either by using the circumference, which is given in the question, or we use the diameter. Now remember that the radius is from the midpoint of our circle to one end of our circumference, which is represented as r. Now since we know that there are two ways, let's talk about the two ways and see how we can determine the radius. So we can determine the radius by using the circumference, and we know that from the formulas that are given, r is equal to, in this case, circumference divided by 2 pi, or on the other hand, we can use this other formula, which is, we know that the diameter divided by 2 gives you the radius as shown here. So if from here to here is r, from here to here is r, so r plus r gives you the diameter. Therefore r is 2 times, well, itself, that gives you the diameter. Or on the other hand, you can say diameter divided by 2 gives you the radius. So therefore in this case the radius is equal to the diameter divided by 2. So let's see whether both particular ways will give us the same answer. And so in this case what we have is that, hey, since we're given the radius, we're not given the radius, we're asked to find the radius. We know the circumference, which is 40. So we have our radius to be equal to 40 divided by 2 times, we know that our pi, which is shown here, is 3.14. That will be used to determine our specific radius. And so what we're going to do is that we'll go back to our calculator, drag it over here, start from scratch. We know that our specific circumference is 40 divided by, take note that we're dividing this by 2, and once we have our answer, we also divide our number divided by pi, and so this will be equal to 6.366, and so our radius here is equal to 6.366. Our number is going to be in kilometers, don't forget the units. And let's check the other way and see whether we get the same answer. And so in here we know that our radius is equal to the diameter divided by 2. So therefore we know that our diameter is 12.73 kilometers. So we are going to put our diameter in this equation, which is 12.73, take note, divided by 2. And let's see whether we're going to get the same answer. So we're going to go back here, a calculator, we're going to type circle, start 12 point, don't forget the other numbers, 73. Take note that there are more numbers, but we're going to see whether this is going to be accurate in our answer. So this will be divided by, take note, 2, and hit equals, and we get 6.365. So it is really close, but it actually works. It actually works. So 6.365 kilometers. And so that is the other way to go about determining the radius of our specific shape. So it's really awesome to see how this plays out based on our specific question. And finally here is, since we're determining the radius, how about the area? So this is where it's going to be interesting. We'll see the transition going from diameter to radius and finally to area. And we know that the area is based on our specific shape, which is shown right here, to be the specific space that our specific shape occupies. So all these regions right here, all these space that this particular cyclist occupy to form our circle is determined to be called our area. And so the area of our circle is determined to be what? So when you go in here and you play around with your formula which was given, we know that the area of a circle, which I'm going to write as subscript, is equal to pi multiplied by the square of our radius. And so once we have this, we're going to put our numbers in here, and so our area of our circle is equal to pi is what? 3.14 multiplied by our radius, which is what we determined to be right here, 6.366. and so 6.366, take note, we're going to perform the square of that. And so therefore, go into your calculator, we're given this number here. I know it's not accurate, but you can just use that number as the radius, because that is what we use to determine the radius from our specific diameter. And so once you perform the square, which is shown as this particular symbol, you're going to get 40.513. And once you perform the square of that, the next is to multiply the square of our radius, which is this number, by the pi. So you go to multiplication times pi, and you hit equals to, and we get our area to be 127 or 127.27 kilometers what squared. And so our area of this particular cyclist path that was covered based on that particular cycling in terms of the circumference, the area is equal to, remember the number is 127 or 127.27 kilometer squared. And so therefore we're able to determine not only the area, which is equal to 127.27 kilometers squared, but also we're able to determine the radius, which is equal to, in this case, 6.366. We're going to use that number, kilometers. And finally, we're able to determine the specific diameter of our same circle. And in this case here, our diameter is equal to 12.73 kilometers. This shows that yes, the diameter, half of it gives us the radius, and the square of our radius multiplied by our pi gives us this particular number for our area. And so our diameter is determined by the ratio of our specific circumference, which was given the question, by our pi. So that's about it for the particular video. I hope you found this really informative. Let me hear your thoughts about how to use a calculator in order for you to determine these particular answers and the logic behind interpreting questions given a particular variable and you're asked to find the other three variables. All the same, thanks for following me through this. Truly appreciate. See you on the next video. Stay smart as always and believe in yourselves.